Hello, everybody. It's me, Brett Mercer from the Independent Comedy Club. It's time for a yet another edition of the Independent Comedy Club interviews people that have performed at the Independent Comedy Club. That's a name I just made up for this interview series because, I don't know if the us hopefully in just a second here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're tuning in right now, I see your names popping up. That rocks. That rocks. All right, hell yeah. We've got Chloe in the chat, and we're about to kick it off. If you guys are ready, let's do it. Folks, Chloe,
Really?
can you hear me?
What's up? How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm hanging out in New York, just hoping for, doing it well with him.
Right. Yeah. It's
It's weird. It's fine.
Are you? How close are you to any of the major action? Is it like right outside your house? Oh, geez, we are.
Sorry, I went off I went off my Wi-Fi because I think my Wi-Fi was being bad.
Gotcha.
Sorry, ask that again. You or
Are you are you cl are you close by to any of the action that's
not
happening today?
not really. We're deep enough in Brooklyn. Um it's like if we were to walk it's like a 20-minute bike for me, but if we were to walk it would be like well over an hour.
Okay.
But we've been to the protests and stuff, and we just take the train, and it's weird.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, hopefully, everything's smooth. How has everything been going during quarantine?
You mean like with comedy?
Yeah, yeah.
It is it's weird. At first I was doing a few live shows, and then it just like really fell off, and I've like stopped pursuing because it felt weird to be like to like ask to be on Zoom shows.
Right.
But I write for the Tonight Show, and so I'm still working, which is like, I mean, it's such a blessing in terms of having money, and it's really it's nice that like I'm still making comedy the whole time.
Right.
So I don't know. I've kind of like I think that's part of why I've sort of given up on the live shows, because like on asking to do live shows, because it's like whatever. Like I'm spending all my days still writing comedy, so it's like fine if I'm not performing.
Right. And for the viewers, Chloe, you're a writer for The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon,
Mm-hmm.
which is that's quite an accomplishment for a comedian to write for one of the biggest comedy institutions. How has that changed since COVID, the pandemic started? Has the process with writing changed at all?
We I mean, yes and no. So obviously, like the shows are at home. We're writing at home. The show happened to be we all worked very independently. Like there are a lot of late nights where they really, really work out of a writer's room. And
Hmm.
that was never how, at least in my experience, and I haven't been there for very long, but in my experience, that's never been how the Tonight Show worked. So we were already pretty independent, and excuse me, the system was already like a little chaotic. And so to go into like to be writing from home all of a sudden, uh the chaos kind of stayed the same. And because we were already working really independently, it was kind of similar. I have friends who wrote at shows where they really worked out of a writer's room, and that was such a hard transition to then everybody's at home and people are just over Zoom. um Excuse me, but that wasn't our experience. We would just sort of like get assignments, and then we would go do them by ourselves and then come back, and that's like pretty much still how it's been.
Interesting. So it seems like, even though everything has changed, the basic process didn't change very much. Has there been a change in
Yeah.
I guess the content? Like, are they looking to stay away from things or go, more towards, you know,
different topics,
Are you talking
in our
about
world
like
today.
yeah. This week, so we were on hiatus last week, so we actually weren't making any new shows
Mhm.
when all of the George Floyd stuff happened, when it started. And we have had a lot of really intense discussions and disagreements this week about how to handle it, and I don't think anybody feels like we've gotten it exactly right. But
Mhm.
it's hard. I mean, whatever. It's hard for a bunch of reasons to get it right. But we are talking about it constantly. We are always trying very hard to get it right.
Right. It's interesting because I mean, in Detroit, where the club is and where we all kind of live, we don't really there's not much industry here, especially for like writing. So it's interesting
Right.
to hear just the process. It's a how close of is writing for a late night talk show. How is that? Is that similar to stand up in any way, or is it a completely different part of the brain?
It is. I would say it's like somewhere. I mean, I feel like every answer in any like comedy question is always like a
Right.
little of all. Um, it was very different in a lot of ways. I don't know. It's like the core root of it, that like you take an idea and then you make associations off of that idea and you see where those associations link up. Like that is joke. Sorry, we got our
Mm.
curfew warning to our phones.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
About that
Um,
time, huh?
yeah, about that time. So yeah, so like from the basic perspective of joke writing, it's still similar. Um, and but like the way I wrote jokes was very personal. I
Hmm.
mostly just talked about my own life, and that doesn't transition over. Whereas like people who are more observational stand-ups to start with, people who are more like, wow, isn't it weird how we load the dishwasher? Wow, what a fantastic comic that person sounds like. But like somebody who already started in that point, I think has an easier time transitioning over to um, late night writing than somebody who is a super personal comic. But you pick it up. I mean, it is the kind of thing where I think I had to remind myself. It took several months, but I only recently have been like, oh, I really didn't have much of this experience before, and I think it's fairly unusual for somebody to be hired into this position with very little, with very little experience that directly applies to it. So like most people either come from another TV writing job, or they they come from the sketch world where they're very used to putting out like a bit every week or whatever.
Hmm.
And that just wasn't. I had only ever written for myself, and that like it really did just take a couple months to like get my feet under me there.
Gotcha. Good. Now, have you? I don't know. How long have you been working there?
About 5 months. I got hired in
About
June.
5 months. Okay. My next question was going to be how that translates back into stand up, but it's now that stand up is
Right.
not necessarily existing at the moment. Like, you know.
I mean, even at least for the couple months where I was doing stand up and writing for the Tonight Show, like before quarantine, um, I think the writing on this night show translates back into stand up probably more easily than my stand up translated into the Tonight Show writing. Although maybe I'm not giving the stand up enough credit.
Hmm.
But the Tonight Show just like I'm writing for a very broad audience, and sometimes like so broad that it winds up sort of diluting the comedy. But it also is this like constant exercise in just like write the punchline, connect the ideas, get there as fast as you can, and move on, and just like rinse and repeat over and over and over. And that kind of repetition is really helpful in stand up. It also just um, I truly think that it gave me like a broader reference bank, which is maybe weird that like I came in with my reference bank, but then I'm sitting next to 15 writers who have their own reference banks, and then I get to hear their ideas all day. And so then when I go and write my own thing, I'm like, this is like if I'm, you know, making a metaphor about if I'm writing an analogy and a joke, I might like think about somebody else's version of that analogy in a way that just like makes my sort of brain broader.
Gotcha. That's it's really interesting. I'm always interested in like writers' rooms since it does seem like a million miles away, and especially with such a broad audience, you know.
Yeah.
What is it that got you into comedy in the first place?
I have always I've always performed in some way. I was in theater forever and ever. I was I did improv in college and a little bit after. And I competed in speech and debate from seventh grade all the way through college. And speech is an individual performance. You're standing alone on a stage, performing to people. Your time, like you have a time limit, you have some relative direction, you're writing for yourself, you're in a lineup, you are sort of implicitly judged. So it actually is very similar to stand up in a lot of ways that I didn't know until I started doing stand up. But so I did.
You might get bumped for a better debater or something like that, or
right. They yeah, they cut your time. They ask you to stretch.
Mhm.
So yeah, I competed in speech all through college. Then I had like a big kid corporate job. They laid me off after a couple of years, and I was like, I'm gonna do the performance that I always wanted to do. And I thought I would do improv, but I made myself do one stand-up open mic as like, you know, what if you miss a great thing? And like 30 seconds into the first open mic, I was like, oh, this is speech. This is what I've done for 10 years. This is what I want to keep doing. I love this so much. So
Interesting.
that was like, and it for a couple months, I like kind of dabbled back and forth between stand-up and improv, but pretty quickly I just transitioned right over to like really committed to stand up.
Yeah. I mean, I have a similar experience. It was a speech class in high school where I
Oh,
got
really?
like my first laugh, and I was like, you can,
Yeah.
this is something that you can do, you know. And it wasn't until like, you know, many years later that I actually did stand up, but that kind of stuck in my brain a little
Right.
bit.
Right. I think, and I do think that like, I have so many friends who love improv and who are so funny and who do stand up, and they're like, I like stand up. It's fine, but it's just not like I like that having a group on stage. I like having people around me. You know, and
Hmm.
I feel pretty much the exact inverse about improv, where I'm like, I like improv. It's fine. I prefer to be alone. I want all the attention. I want people's eyes on me.
Yeah, I also like the stick that amplifies my voice, you know, instead of
Right,
having to shout, you know.
right, right.
Is there anything that you wish you had known when you started?
It's so funny. It is a perfect question, and yes, the answer is a million things. And now I'm like, what are the things that I wish I had known? I think one of the like biggest. This is maybe a shitty lesson, but this is a thing that I have been like, oh, this is true.
Hmm.
Is that in any case, at any level of like moving up, and so this means like at a local level, this could be like getting booked on a medium show or getting passed at the B level club. And then it could be getting booked on a big show or getting passed at the A level club. Then it could be, then when you start traveling and you're like, okay, I'm going to go spend a week in Denver, it could be like getting on the medium shows in Denver, then getting on the big show. Anyway, so like, I don't just mean this as like getting a job writing for late night. I mean like any step in comedy. If you are asking how to get that thing, you are very far from having that thing. That like if
Interesting.
when you are close to having the thing, you know exactly how to get it. That doesn't mean like that doesn't necessarily mean you're confident in it. It doesn't mean that you're not scared, but you do like there are clear steps. And if you don't know those clear steps, it means you are not close to them. The flip side of that coin though is that gap is between like being very far from it and not knowing anything and knowing exactly how to get it and being very close is actually like very, very, very narrow, but it's just very deep. It's like a little hard. It's hard to get over, but it can happen very quickly. So the flip side is that like sometimes one week you don't know how to get something, and then the next week you know exactly how to get something, and that might be because like a club booker finally, like, you've spent years hanging out at the club and you're like, I don't know what's, you know, like, I don't know what else to do, and then the next night the club booker pulls you aside and is like, hey, we'd love to have you audition or whatever. And then you go, oh, and they say, you get 2 auditions and they're 7 minutes each and they're back-to-back weeks and do 2 different sets. And you go, okay, now I know exactly how to get there. So that, but like, I had the experience with like writing for late night. I was like, I don't fucking know. And that was even while I was submitting packets. Fallon was like my 15th packet that I submitted. So I had submitted a bunch of other packets and still was like, I don't know. I'm really just like shitting it out into the ether and not hearing anything back. And like, that's whatever. I guess I can't be attached to it. And then the process of getting this job was super smooth. And I know that that's not everyone's experience, but like, it like happened almost literally overnight. I mean, it happened like over the course of a week and a half, and like where I went from not knowing about the packet to having a job. So it is the kind of thing where it's like suddenly overnight it changes. And part of that was like because of other work that I've done and other networking that I've done and other people that I've met and other people who I've made like me and who I like and whatever, like all of that, it plays a part in it in a way that I could never see. But that, I think that is my like, that's one of the biggest takeaways. The other thing is that the 3 things I think success in comedy is split into even thirds. 1/3 is being funny enough, but it is only 1/3. 1/3 is people liking you, and 1/3 is not quitting. And like, I really think that is the like, that's it, you know, like being funny is not the majority of it. It is a critical, necessary part, but it is not the majority.
Right.
So that's my
talk shit, say names. No.
Yeah, I feel like I could go. Yeah, I have like all these whatever.
I guess a similar question, but just slightly reworded. Like, if somebody was to be starting today at this point, like, what is some advice that you'd give them? Not necessarily something that, you know, I guess we'll just leave the question at that. I have a tendency to not finish questions perfectly. But
Perfect.
what advice would you give to somebody starting today?
I mean, I would say don't start today.
Yeah.
I would say like start in a few months.
How about tomorrow? Yeah.
So I'm going to answer this like as if somebody is starting in a year. Also, like, I don't know, like I think the Midwest is going to open, the South is going to open first, and then the Midwest is going to open, and then the coast. So like, maybe you guys are already much closer to being open out in Michigan than we are here in New York. I'm going to answer this question as if it's like somebody who is starting in semi-normal times.
Watch out for the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Wear a mask. To me, the biggest thing is like, do it because you love some part of it. You do not have to love every part of it. You will not love every part of it. You probably won't love most of it, but like, do it because you love something and not because you're trying to like manipulate your way through stuff. And that doesn't mean don't manipulate the system. 100% manipulate. Absolutely. Every comic does. It's what you need to do to succeed. I've manipulated, whatever. Like, work the system. Absolutely. But it's also like the thing that will help you more than anything is having genuine friends. And I know that everybody says that. I know that's like not a new thing. And I think I always understood it as like, okay, because then my friend will get a job on a writing staff and then they will call me and hire me. And like, that's not going to happen. That's not the reason to have genuine friends. The reason to have genuine friends is because otherwise comedy fucking sucks. If you don't have, and you need somebody who you can be like, how do I message this show because they said something shitty online and I want to drop or something. Like, you have to be able to like run that by somebody who knows what's going on. And then That and I had another thing, but I don't remember what the other thing was. I mean, there's a lot of things, but yeah.
Right. Um, yeah, having people that know. I mean, I would relate it to basically any other like business meets social circle where it's like it's we're basically all a bunch of freelancers, and there's no system in place for like getting the things that you were talking about before, and so it's just
Oh,
yeah.
another thing is in speech, everything is like through speech to me, but in speech we would always, when I was competing and then when I coached kids, every team that I was on or that I coached had rules about van talk, which was the idea that like you start competing when you walk in the door of the school where the tournament is being held, and like your judge is going to be in the bathroom with you, even if you don't realize it. Like your judge is in the stall. And so if you're like, oh, this judge really fucked me over in the bathroom, then the next time the judge sees you at the next tournament, yeah, she's going to fuck you over. Like she's going to be annoyed. And so it's that like you're not only competing in the room, and save stuff for the van talk, like just save it for your team, save it for the van talk. And that transitions over so well to stand up that it's like, you are like, it is a job, and it's weird to have a job where your job is to get drunk at a bar. It's very strange, but it is a job. And like and so the second you walk into that bar, you are at work. And even if it's a shitty open mic and you don't like the people and whatever, it's like, that's still, you are still performing in some way. And of course, because it's that extended performance, like you're performing for 6 hours, you don't have to be perfect on all the time. But I do think like you're competing as soon as you walk into school, save it for the van is like, I like put those parallel ideas onto stand up too.
Makes sense. I guess looking forward, okay, so obviously we're in the middle of probably one of the biggest, a plague of sorts.
Yeah.
I guess, how do you see comedy, and I deliberately didn't say stand up, but like, how do you think comedy is going to exist beyond this? What do you think is going to change?
I don't know. I mean, I think even before the pandemic, we were in such a shifting time of like how the generation below us consumes comedy. Like I watch YouTube shows and I look at shit on Twitter and I watch TikTok videos and I'm like, I don't think it's funny. And I don't even think it's because I don't speak the language. I mean, I sound like a fucking boomer if I were to try and like, I can't say any of it, but I do think I think I understand, like the generation below us is this like, there's this like hyper inverted irony. And I think I get the attraction of it, but it's not attractive to me. And that has scared me way before the pandemic, to be like, oh, as soon as these people are paying money for comedy, they're not paying money for me. I don't know what I have for them. If they like these weird fucking like frantic frenzied cuts with memes and sound effects, and like if that's what your brain is used to consuming, like Jesus, I have nothing for you. So
right.
That is a whole other thing. And then how they will change with the pandemic. I think at this point, the direction that everything's going, I think like for the most part, we're going to go kind of back to normal. The only thing I'm afraid of is that the only people in comedy clubs are going to be Republicans, because everything, I mean, because like the people who are concerned about the pandemic, and the people who are like, no, I'm not going to sit in a packed club of 150 people in a basement in New York that's like dank and weird, with like servers squinching by me and drinking. Like those people are the liberals who think I'm funny. And
right.
The people who are like, fuck this, they don't even have to be Southern. They are from Staten Island. The people who are like,
right,
fuck the pandemic.
Southern Staten Island.
Yeah. The walls. I don't know what else. it's like those are the people who are going to be in the comedy clubs. So, like Florida already has comedy clubs back open, and I'm like, oh, it's like I am sure I would eat shit in front of that crowd.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting in Michigan because, especially around the Detroit area, because a lot of the gigs are, we'll just say from the south of Staten Island,
Yeah,
like the
right.
Republic,
Yeah.
like big Republican rooms,
You mean
and
even pre-pandemic?
yeah, and we're beginning to get into a phase where like some places are starting to open up a little bit. Are you excited are you considering like hitting the road or going outside of the state of
Um,
New York?
I I don't know. So I can't really travel with this job. Like the job is so limiting for traveling. The job is so limiting for doing stand up even in the city.
Hmm.
Because like I wake up at 8, I write for an hour, I bike into work. I work until anywhere between 6:30 and 8:30. Then I usually put my bike on the train because I have to be on my phone on the way. I like need that time to work on the way home. I get home. I work until 11:45. I go to sleep. I repeat. That's how the job has been, and so it's really hard to fit stand up in during like with this job in particular. So I have to figure out. And then quarantine, like I've had more time, but also there are no stand up shows. So
Hmm.
I don't know with the job, but in terms of like generally, am I excited to do stand up again? So excited. I'm so excited. Yeah, I miss it.
Right. No, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but have you done any Zoom shows?
I have, yeah.
Well, I personally I have not.
Yeah.
What was that like? Did you get any sense of an audience?
Total. Yes, I feel like I've done mostly pretty good Zoom shows, and I've done a couple bad ones. Um, I haven't been Zoom bombed. I haven't had like people putting porn in the chat at all, which is great. Um, I don't. To me, it's like it just really always felt like it made more sense to be podcasting, like to like do this, even if
Hmm.
maybe the person, even if it wasn't like quite so responsive, it was still like conversational. Like I did bits where it was like, here's a thought I had, and I'm just going to talk about it for a minute, rather than like if I was at a show, I would be like, what are the punches? And the conversational style worked a lot better.
Hmm. 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 Would you recommend it? Would you recommend it? Would you recommend doing a Zoom show to stay sharp? Like if you weren't writing all the time, do you think that would be
I
an
think
outlet?
I think it's a different skill, or like,
Yeah.
I mean, like they're clearly very related, but like I don't feel sharp. I don't. I feel like I could do like 10 Zoom shows in a row and go do a stand up show and eat shit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So
Well,
I actually did a stand up show a few nights ago, on the
really
back of a pickup truck on the Upper East Side.
int
Um,
interesting.
yeah, a club set up a comedy club on the Upper East Side set up or Upper West Side, sorry, set up a pickup truck and like speakers on the back of the truck and then chairs like in the street. And
Wow.
I got up and did my thing, and it was like so painful. I mean, it just was like, it's been so long. I didn't remember my jokes. It's weird, but
Hmm. Was there an audience there?
yeah, there were like 40 people. I don't know. I don't understand. I think a lot of people, I know somebody said, I wish I could eat shit right now. I know. I know. Yeah, there were a lot of people. I think a lot of people were literally just like walking by in the street and were like, what the fuck is this? And stopped and watched. But there were a decent amount of people who were like sitting in the chairs.
Wow, interesting. I had no idea that's legal. I guess things.
It's not. It's fully not. It's not. It's
Oh, I see. I
100% not
see.
legal.
That's why I
Yes.
said a comedy club, but not. Oh, the comedy.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's 100% not legal.
Well, I wish I could eat shit right now. Yeah, what are jokes? At
Great
this point, it's been, getting kind of nicer out, and especially with like the protests, it's like I've been out and around people again, and it's like, you know what? I do miss this,
Totally.
and it's, you really can't come back
Yeah.
soon enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Oh, go ahead.
you were here. I think you were here around the beginning of our of our existence as a club.
It was May of last year.
Okay, yeah, so that was pretty early on, and you were here with Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you guys were like running something or taping
Yeah,
something.
we
Did
were. I mean, wasn't exciting. It's the kind of thing where it's like from where we're at, it's not exciting. But like,
mm,
if I was still back in Minneapolis, I would be like, oh my God, that's so incredible. How do you have that connection? Of course. And then like you move out here and you're like, oh, everybody, whatever. It's
yeah,
perspectives change. But yes, we were taping half-hour auditions for Comedy Central's half-hour shows.
gotcha.
So we
How did
would say
that?
like, we're taping for Comedy Central, and like, no,
Yeah,
we're fucking not. We're taping
yeah.
a thing to give to Comedy Central. But yeah,
I remember when that was because we had a couple of those shows where it's like I was taping like, should we say Comedy Central? And I'm like,
it's
whatever gets asses in the seats, I
it's
suppose.
exactly that. It's 100%. Like you should say, I guess maybe yeah right. Like maybe not on the poster, but to your friends.
Yeah, right. Um, has anything else? I guess since then, which was, I mean, about a year ago. That's obviously when you got on the Tonight Show to be a writer. Um, is there anything? Are you planning on transitioning out of stand-up for writing, or are you still holding strong with the art form?
This job has very specifically convinced me that I really miss live performance and want to be in live performance. And the schedule of writing when we're in studio is so intensive that it makes it really, really hard to do live performance. So, um, there are a lot of people where they're like, I am doing stand up so that I can get a writing job, and then they get a writing job and they're like, well, perfect, this is my dream job, and somebody's paying me a lot of money to write comedy every day, and my goal is just to keep this job. And I don't David said when they were taping for Comedy Central they meant the mail and DVDs. Yeah, 100% correct. No, but I feel like I always thought of myself as a performer first and a writer second, and I think I was like, well, we'll see how this job goes. And this job has convinced me that I really miss performance and that I want to be back. I want to ultimately wind up in a place where I can do the performance that I want to do as much performance as I want to do. That said, I'm happy to be at this job
Mhm.
for as long as they'll have me and get paid.
Hell yeah. I guess my final question is just what advice would you give to comics out there who might want to pursue a career in writing, TV or
um,
late night or otherwise?
yeah. So outside of late night, the answer is like have samples, have at least one. I mean, realistically, like if I'm really just telling you this is not where to start baby, start tiny little, but have 2 pilots and a spec. I have also, for reference, I have 1.5 pilots, so who the fuck am I to be saying this? But
Hmm.
have 2 pilots and a spec script, 2 originals and a spec script, and have like any smaller things that you have. Like if you have an idea for a web series, write it. And like it doesn't have to be good. Get that first draft out. You don't have to make it. Just like have the script. If you have an idea for a sketch, write the sketch. Also, none of this is shit that I do. I don't follow my own advice 100%. I absolutely do not. So like I am a hypocrite, absolutely. But like I have an idea for a serious short film that I've started to be like, oh, I should write that. I like instead of just holding on to it in my head. So it is the kind of thing where it's like you just need stuff to show somebody, and whether that is somebody who's going to hire you or whether that's an agent or manager who's going to represent you, you need things to show them. I've heard people say like you can even show them packets you've submitted. I guess I don't think that's the right move, but if that's the only thing you have, absolutely show them packets you've submitted. So that's like generally is like get shit out of your head onto paper. I am the fucking worst at doing that, so I'm a hypocrite. I know, do as I say, not as I do. It's easier. I've found like it's better to have a partner where you set up a schedule and you're like, you like stick to those deadlines as much as you can. I give hood advice. It says the whitest girl from Minnesota. And I have had a lot of success, or like it's like been very helpful for me to take classes. So like I took a pilot writing class put on by a friend of mine, and it was cheap because she was doing it in her parents' kitchen. But she used to write for TV and she was like between jobs and she was doing this to make money. And it meant that like that's how I got a pilot started, because I was paying money to have somebody tell me you need to have something show up. So like that, like whatever your motivation needs to be, motivate yourself. Get shit out of your head. And then late night specifically, packets. I mean, the goal is like you need to be doing packets. That's for the most part how they hire. And I guess the same with narrative, for the most part, how they hire is by looking at a submission. Packets are hard to get if you don't have are hard to come by if you don't have a rep, but everyone who you know, anytime you are personally asking somebody for advice, ask them if they have any always. Yeah, David, is it still live? I don't know. His video's frozen.
Okay, well, yeah,
Whatever.
it
Oh,
just
great.
paused
You're
for
back.
a minute.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Anyway, there are packets that some packets have to be submitted through representation. Some packets do not have to be submitted through representation. Those are the packets that you want, obviously, if you assuming you don't have reps to find you those packets, and those packets can be passed along through friends. So anytime you have like that is another reason to like have genuine friends, because they will send you shit. And if you are asking somebody who might have access, like feel free to ask them, do you have a list of people you send packets to? And if so, would you add me to that? There's like not a lot of I don't think there's a better way to deal with it.
Well, sound advice, you know, do the work, be professional, you know, and make the right friends, I suppose.
And like apply for shit. So like there's like some Disney, whatever, a little like Disney training thing that's open, right? Disney writers, something that's open right now that I think the deadline is Friday. I think Nickelodeon or Universal has one that the deadline also might be this Friday. I did the late night writers workshop through NBC. Like look for those I think they're like apprenticeships or something, whatever. Look for those opportunities and submit to them, because those are also reasons, like they'll say you need to, like the Disney thing, you need 2 original pilots. So like, okay, go write your 2 original pilots. And like NBC late night writers asks for a packet, and like that's a good practice packet, even if you don't get it. 1,000 people apply for 6 spots, but like do the packet because you'll get better. So that's my
hell yeah. Yeah, that's all great advice, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the live stream here. Is there anything you want to plug to the people watching?
Yeah, I run a Tuesday live stream on YouTube every 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. It's called Something Good, and the YouTube channel is youtube.com/somethinggoodny. We had the name before, John Krasinski. Fuck you, John Krasinski.
Yeah.
And
is that just is it a similar concept? Like, no.
Oh, sorry. John's is much more like candy. The idea of ours is that it's a variety show where we talk about good things, but also we talk about bad things. So last night, me and my co-hosts did a live stream where the 3 of us just sat and talked about what's going on in the world, police brutality, George Floyd, all of the protests, all of that. And my feeling is that good vibes only doesn't work. That it's never like saying good vibes only is just pushing stuff down. And that this show is like trying to have all vibes. All vibes matter. Oh God. Please do not isolate that.
Don't clip it. No one clip it. All right, well, that's awesome. I'll definitely be checking that out every Tuesday, 9 p.m.
Sweet, thank you.
YouTube.com.
Yeah, and we're at Something Good NY on every platform: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for doing this. I hope to see you around Detroit again, maybe in the future, hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. All right.
For sure.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
For sure.
All right.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye.